Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and running. Glad to have you here today. It's a little bit different show today. It's just me, Sean Solo's show, I guess. No Vince, no Jesse, because they both have, day job responsibilities, whatever else. For our regulars, take note. Salty didn't have to put me on the clock today to say, hey, it's time to get going, because I'm solo. I'm not waiting on anybody. So the show actually started on time. So we got that going for us. You are stuck with just me, but we have two guests coming up on today's show. It's our first two-guest show. I'll tell you about them in a minute. But we do have a couple basketball notes off the top today to start with. If you hadn't seen, Micah Shrewsbury landed another commitment out of the transfer portal today. He got 6'9" forward Trae Davis from Seton Hall. He announced his commitment this afternoon on social media. Davis is originally from Warren Central High School in Indianapolis, so he's, another Indiana guy already, too, with Logan Imes that Shrewsbury has gone out and brought to South Bend. He played in 32 of Seton Hall's 34 games this past season. He only averaged 2.8 points, 2.8 rebounds in 13.4 minutes per game. But it's another guy with size. He's 6'9". He's a small forward. They get more size out of the transfer portal after they landed 6'10" forward Keba Jai from Penn State, of course, last month. And last month, of course, because today is June 1st. But they also got more size with Kerry Booth. You remember him, the 6'10" forward from Colorado, incoming freshman. So they've been able to get a lot of size right away. Trae Davis from Seton Hall, that gives Shrewsbury 10 scholarship players now on the roster heading into the season. So, we'll see. We'll see if he adds anybody else, but I think 10 is at least a good starting point. And Salty says he likes having Indiana guys on the team. Nothing wrong with Indiana guys, and Micah Shrewsbury definitely, following up his roots. He's got a couple of Indy guys with Imes and Davis now, and he said in his introductory press conference at the end of March that he needed to make Indiana a priority, and he's got a couple of Indiana guys. Some other Notre Dame basketball related news: Monty Williams, fired, of course, by the Phoenix Suns last month, just 2 years after leading the Suns to the NBA championship finals, the finals to the championship series, whatever you want to call it, the finals. But he's been hired by the Detroit Pistons, and not just hired, he gets the richest contract for a head coach in NBA history. So he'll be making somewhere around $13 million a year. But it also means he's going to coach Neil Ivy's son, Jaden, up there in Detroit. He just finished his rookie season with the Pistons. So see where that goes for Monty Williams. Young club and a lot of rebuilding to do. So that's the basketball news. Two guests coming up. First up, 86 days to go until Notre Dame Navy in Dublin. So we're going to talk to Navy football insider Bill Wagner. After that, old friend of mine, Jim Kehoe. He's a unique guest. We're not going to talk X's and O's, football, basketball, or anything else. But Jim is a Sports Illustrated collector. Yes, he collects Sports Illustrated. He is not a collector for Sports Illustrated. He's not going to track you down, Salty. He wants to know if he leans on people for their late subscriptions. No, that's not what Jim does. But a lot of details. He's got some a lot of cool old SIs. He'll share some of those with you. He's also going to tell you, like, if you're interested in collecting, like if you've got a couple boxes full of old SIs, he can tell you, how to find out just how valuable they are, and maybe, turn some of those into some capital of your own. First, though, longtime Navy beat writer Bill Wagner from the Annapolis Capital Gazette. We're going to talk to him. The first one, the Navy interview with Bill, is a recorded interview. They've got a new head coach, Ken Niumatalolo, no longer there. Jim is going to be with me live, though, after we talk to Bill. So we'll start off with Bill right now. Well, we are joined for a little Navy talk by Bill Wagner from the Annapolis Capital Gazette. I was about to say Post Gazette for some reason, but Capital Gazette. Thanks for doing this today, Bill. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Also, the Baltimore Sun. We're now one. It's the new era of the newspaper business where I work for the paper that I competed against for 20 years.
All right. There's a lot of that going around, isn't there? I mean, I think everyone's found themselves with new places and new titles and all kinds of stuff. But well, it's been a while since we talked, and Ken Niumatalolo is gone now after 15 years there at Navy. No real surprise, I'm guessing, after 3 straight losing seasons to kind of end his tenure there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is a surprise just based on his stature. I mean, he's the winningest coach in the history of Navy football, and he was very beloved by all of his players, former players, and any assistant that ever worked for him. I mean, he's just, if you knew Ken Niumatalolo, you would understand what an incredibly decent human being he was, and he ran the program in such a first-class manner. So it was a bit of a shock to some people just because of who he was. But if you do dial down on the record and where the program was trending, it was not.
Well, I know we've touched on this over the years. Where did it really kind of go off track for him these last few years, do you think?
Well, the offense, obviously, has not been up to the Navy standard, and there's a lot of reasons for it. The triple option will always be the bread and butter for Navy, but they needed to add other elements to keep teams honest. And number one, which a lot of people had been advocating for years, was some sort of short passing game, because the Navy passing attack had basically been play action deep balls, and that doesn't always work. And especially what opponents had started doing is just keeping a safety back to prevent that deep play action pass. So people have been saying for years, one of them, that you got to develop some sort of short passing game, incorporate some screens, some short crossing routes, ways to get the ball to playmakers out in space, but with not high risk passes, and also knowing that you're not a very good pass blocking team, that you're not built that way, not ask the offensive lineman to have to block long on pass plays. So the bottom line is like, I think Coach Ken, he believed in his system and he was somewhat unwilling to change. I know some of the assistant coaches had suggested some things that Navy could do differently, and he kind of was, stubborn about it. And I think ultimately that may have proved the difference. But the bottom line, to answer your original question, is the offense has not been up to snuff.
Sure.
For, really 4 of the last 5 years. They had one magical season in which Malcolm Perry, who turned out to be an NFL talent, ran wild. And other than that, the 4 seasons surrounding that one, the 2019 season, have been poor, subpar offensively.
Well, and the new head coach is Brian Newberry, maybe a little bit unusual since he was the defensive coordinator there for Niumatalolo, and he takes the helm. You don't see very often where a head coach gets fired and one of his assistants gets promoted to the job. So what's the thought on that, and how have things gone so far?
Yeah, well, it is rare, but I think in this case, there was a situation where the defense has been carrying the torch for the last few seasons. The defense has been outstanding and ranked among the nation's best on a lot of levels. Navy, I think, ranked second nationally in rushing defense last year, which is frankly amazing, especially since they play 2 of the top rushing teams in the country every year in Army and Air Force. So you saw, Notre Dame got Navy good on some, long pass plays and others in the first half, but you saw what Navy did in the second half.
Yep.
Notre Dame didn't even barely pick up any yardage, much less first down. So the defense has been very solid, and I think it was a case where they didn't want to lose a talented defensive coordinator who had brought in and established a solid defense. And Brian Newberry has great leadership skills and has always, all of his players really respect him and think highly of him. I think basically the mandate was, let's get some new offensive minds in here and come up with a new offense. There's nothing wrong with the defense, but let's get some new offensive people in here to try to develop some new schemes that'll get the offense back to where it needs to be.
And I think did I see that tight ends are going to be incorporated more in this offense now?
Yes, and that's something that Air Force has done for years. Has always had a tight end who could be a downfield throwing pass threat. So, yes, they're going to incorporate tight ends. I think it may take a while because right now all they have is, basically converted defensive players.
Yeah,
and they're blockers at this point. It may be a few years. This current recruiting class is the first time they recruited tight ends who were brought in to be more skillful guys that can run routes and catch passes. So it may be a few years before they get to the point where they're utilizing the tight end the way they intend to.
Were you able to see a lot during the spring? Did you guys have much media access to see, maybe what some of those offensive changes look like out there?
Yes, I go to a lot of practices during the spring, and we see him running plays, and I think a lot of it was the short passing game element. I mean, we could talk about this all day, but there's been major changes to how you can block that have really impacted triple option offense. The number one being cut blocking on the perimeter. So Navy's slot backs always blocked for each other, and the way that they blocked an opposing cornerback or safety on the edge was a cut block. Well, you can't do that anymore. So now Navy's got 5'8", 170-pound slot backs being asked to block 6'2", 210-pound safeties straight up, and it's a losing battle. So they have to figure out other ways to get the slot backs the ball on the perimeter other than just the pitch. So what we are seeing is more short passing concepts, flares, crossing routes, screen passes, that type of thing. That's the biggest change I've seen. And like I said, we'll see downfield passing with a tight end maybe in 2 or 3 years after they're able to get some skilled guys in here and teach them what they want them to do.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like nothing dramatic, but at the same time, if you just incorporate some of that stuff, you're not just solely reliant on pitch, dive, keeper type stuff, obviously.
Exactly. I think they just want to be a little more versatile and be able to attack teams differently, to just shake things up and also give them more to think about and more to prepare for.
So we saw Xavier Arline at quarterback when Notre Dame and Navy played last November, and that was because Tai Lavatai tore an ACL. So where's Lavatai maybe with his recovery? What's that quarterback situation looking like right now coming out of spring?
Well, as of right now, a current freshman, well, I guess technically now that school's over, he's a sophomore. Teddy Gleaton is the starter. And both Ty Lavatai and Xavier Arline are going to have to beat him out during the summer camp because Gleaton got all of the reps during the spring along with a classmate of his named Blake Horvath. But Gleaton clearly was the better of the two, and they really, really like him for the specific reason he throws the ball really well. He's a big guy. He's like 6'2", 210, 215, so he's a big, solid guy. You may remember Ricky Dobbs that played at Navy.
Right.
He kind of is a lot like Ricky. He's a big guy, so he runs as more of a power runner, not a speed or juke guy. But the most important thing is he throws a really, really good ball. And with their plans to start, increasing the passing game, that gives him an advantage. Ty Lavatai is a pretty good passer. He throws a nice ball, but the fact of the matter is completion percentage during the last 2 seasons has not been that high. But Xavier Arline is not a very good thrower. It's just not his strength. That's not his game. Ty did not participate in spring camp. Obviously, he's recovering from an ACL injury. And Xavier Arline had very limited participation because he was playing lacrosse for Navy men's lacrosse, and he got injured playing lacrosse, so he was not able to play lacrosse or football for a lot of when spring football camp was being held. So those guys are behind. We're talking about a new offense being installed here, completely new offense, new language, new everything. And those guys weren't taking any reps in the spring, whereas Teddy Gleaton got a lot of reps. So right now, Teddy Gleaton's ahead of the game, and I'd put him as the odds-on favorite to start against Notre Dame in the season opener, unless Arline or Lavatai do something really dramatic during the summer training camp.
Well, and it sounds like just, listening to more passing be involved in this offense. I think, again, when we've talked in the past, you've talked about when Navy has been recruiting quarterbacks, they essentially look for athletes and kind of turn them into an option quarterback once they get there to the Naval Academy. It sounds like guys who are actually, athletic quarterbacks, I guess, in a high school might be kind of the new model that they're going to be looking at.
Well, the new offensive coordinator, Grant Chestnut, said that. They said that starting now, they're going to recruit quarterbacks who can throw. That's going to be every bit as important as having ability to run the option. So things have changed, and this offense is going to look different, and they're going to recruit personnel to a new style offense.
So I guess bigger picture, what are some of the bigger other questions that they have coming out of spring camp a month or so ago?
Well, I mean, the defense returns quite a bit of talent, and the new defensive coordinator, of course, Brian Newberry is going to have his fingerprints all over the defense. He's, still going to be very much involved there, but he promoted his inside linebackers coach, PJ Volker, to defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of talent coming back on the defensive side of the ball, and the system should not change very much. So I expect Navy to remain solid on defense. So it's all about offense. And one place where they suffered some serious losses was slot back. Both of the starting slot backs from last season, Mikael Haywood and Vincent Tyrell II, they transferred. So they basically are going to have brand new slot back core because some other guys graduated. There's only two guys, Daniel Jones and Kai Puialoha Rojas, another one of those names.
Yeah.
They're the only two slots that really have any experience. Now they always have a ton of slots in the system, and they like some of their young guys, but slot back at present is an issue until someone proves that they can get the job done at that position. And then, just getting the whole offense back to a level where Navy for so long ranked consistently top 5 in rushing offense. And they've fallen off that a bit, and they need to get back to being a dominant running program. And they're hopeful by throwing these other wrinkles in that when they run, it's not, frankly, if you're a fan of Navy football, the last 2 seasons in particular, you got sick of seeing either fullback dive or quarterback keep. It was just like 75% of the triple option had come down to that. And it was boring. It didn't, it was 2 yards at a time type stuff. And it just got to be frustrating. So everyone's really excited to see some new elements, some new ways to move the ball. And we'll just have to see how that goes. I mean, whether they can get it in one season turned around to the point where the offense is carrying its load a bit more will remain to be seen. And I guess one other question mark, if you will, is they lost their kicker. Bijan Nichols was basically a 4-year starter. Now, last year, he was injured for a lot of the season. I think the Notre Dame game was his first game back after missing every game up to that point. And he missed an extra point in that game. Mm-hmm. But Bijan Nichols was a very solid, reliable kicker, and now they have to find a new place kicker. That's another question mark, I would say.
You talked about those slot backs transferring. It has the transfer portal. Has there been more of that even for Navy since the portal, was thrust upon the college world, I guess?
Yeah, I think it has really increased things because the way it worked before is that the players interested in thinking about transferring would go to the coaching staff, and that would give the coaching staff a head start on trying to convince them to stay, get their friends around them to talk to them about why it's, getting a degree from the academy is so valuable, how, if you graduate from the academy, you're set for life. And now these guys are just entering the portal and getting contacts without, the coaching staff may not even know initially.
Right.
It's changed everything. And the readily available ability to transfer is definitely, I think, causing. And the thing at Navy, which is important to remember, is that after your sophomore year, you can transfer without penalty. If you they do what at Navy, they do what they call a 2-for-7 signing prior to the start of classes of your junior year. And if you sign that paperwork, you're committing to 5 years of postgraduate military service in addition to the final 2 remaining years of your education. And once you sign those papers, if you leave, you can be subject to having the government ask for repayment of your education, which is not, it's probably like close to $100,000 for a year. So
Yeah.
I think what you're seeing is players who, after their sophomore season, think that they might have some sort of pro potential or want to play at a higher level, they're going to transfer just because that's their window to do so. So, yeah, I mean, it's a one-way street for Navy. They can't take any transfers, and they're going to lose some every year. So it's a difficult situation.
We're finally going to get this Notre Dame Navy game over in Dublin this year.
Yeah.
I
was already in 2020 and that didn't happen. And then they didn't even play at all.
I know. Exactly. We got, are you got your flights booked and ready to go?
Yeah. I still have my, my voucher from Aer Lingus. So,
from last time, really?
Yeah. I bought a flight and then they canceled the game and then we got the voucher. So I've got to get organized. That's one of the things I need to do is get organized for the trip. But one thing I did was book into the Navy hotel because I found out that hotel prices in Dublin during that weekend are about $400 to $500 US.
Whew, man.
So they're jacking the prices up.
I saw last week 39,000 fans is what I saw are supposed to make the trip from the States over there to Ireland. So
it's a sellout.
Yeah, exactly. I'm impressed that Aer Lingus gave you a voucher like that, though, that you can use 3 years later, because I had a flight booked during the pandemic and I only had a year to use it. It was domestic, but it was.
I was very pleased. I think a lot of it was COVID related, but yes, it was very, very nice that they extended the voucher.
Bill Wagner, always good to talk to you. First time we've actually seen each other. Usually it's been on the phone, of course, over the years, but hey, technology. Annapolis, Capital Gazette, and the Baltimore Sun as well. Appreciate you, Bill. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sean. Always good to talk to you, buddy.
You too. Bill Wagner, he's been there. He's been covering Navy for 3 decades at this point for the Annapolis Capital Gazette. He's been around for a while. We Are Not Marshall asks about with lacrosse recent national championship, can we do a full lacrosse segment? That is, let's just say it's in the works. They went straight from Philadelphia after spending a day. I think they did a clinic the next day, and then they're in Germany for 10 days. So we'll be efforting lacrosse in the very near future. But we've got something better than lacrosse for you right now. I mean, come on, lacrosse winning a national championship is cool and everything. But we've got with us right now someone I've known for a while. There he is.
Sean Stiers, it is good to see you.
You too. It's been a while.
It has. I've been great, man. Thank you. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been very good as well.
Good. Sean and I have known each other for a long, long time, worked together for a while. So
that's right.
I was so happy when you sent me a text and set this up.
I've been thinking about this for a while as well. And I'm like, I think now is the time, because I think this is really cool. I've been, like I told you in my text, I've been following you, on Twitter, and it's CGC _SI. And Jim has always he's showing off these Sports Illustrated covers, and they're graded. And, he's like always excited about getting into these packages and opening up the boxes and showing off the Sports Illustrateds. You collect Sports Illustrateds.
I do, and I want to thank you for having me on too, because I realize that this is different than what you normally do, talking about collectibles and that sort of stuff in the sports world. So for those that are watching, it is going to be interesting. I promise. Stick around. I may not be the guy from Annapolis who knows Navy football backwards and forwards.
That's right.
It is going to be pretty interesting.
But I mean, as you can see, not to, like people were in the chat, we're kind of poking fun at Bill and his setup. He was literally a talking head the way it was set up.
It's the Zoom world we all live in these days. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Hit the like button while I'm thinking about it. By the way, smash the like button and of course subscribe, rate, and review. Whatever channel that you happen to be watching or listening on. So, Jim, I'm going to be honest. I didn't know when we were working together how into collecting Sports Illustrateds you are, and this just kind of dawned on me. The building we were in, of course, you guys moved into the building before I started working there.
Yeah.
But the walls were decorated with these blown up Sports Illustrated covers and some Rolling Stone and stuff like that as well. Did you play a part in sort of the decor?
Yeah,
so building?
A little bit. Yeah, when we talked about that, we just thought magazine covers would be pretty cool. And obviously, Sean and I worked at the group of radio stations, and so we had some music stations, and so we threw some Rolling Stone magazines. Bill, one of the other guys there, kind of did most of the heavy lifting on it, but he and I discussed it a little bit, and because of our connection with Notre Dame and WSBT radio and all the sports that we covered there, we thought, yeah, we've got to get some Sports Illustrated covers up there too. So yeah, a little bit. I had a little bit in that.
And there were some,
and I haven't been back to that building in a long time, so I assume they're still up there. I assume they're still up there, although the radio stations aren't in that building anymore either. So who knows?
I was going to say, you and me both at this point. It's
been
no
kidding. Right,
4-ish years, I think, probably since.
Yeah. Been over there. Been 5 for me. Yeah,
that's right. So you and I, and a lot of our viewers / listeners as well, for that matter, like the age demographic, we came from a time when Sports Illustrated was huge. It's like you couldn't wait until the SI showed up in your mailbox every week. When and how did you get into actually collecting Sports Illustrated stuff?
Yeah, so I was a big collector as a kid of all sports cards. Obviously, I think all of us collected sports cards in the junk wax era in the 80s and that sort of stuff. Do you remember the starting lineup? There were little action figures.
Yeah.
I had a ton of starting lineups, so I collected all that sort of stuff. And you're right, Sports Illustrated, this was pre-internet. This was really kind of the early days of ESPN. I mean, if this is the early 80s, I mean, I didn't have cable until, the mid 80s and that sort of stuff. So, before right ESPN and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So this is how we connected. I mean, we had the daily newspaper, read the box scores and that sort of stuff. But if you wanted in-depth details and reporting and photography, Sports Illustrated was it. And so we waited by the mailbox for that Sports Illustrated to come into the mail every single week so that we could read about our favorite athletes. And so because I was into collecting sports cards and other stuff, and because Sports Illustrated was so important to me as a kid, I just started collecting them. And so I held on to a lot of them for the years and didn't do much. They were sitting in a box. And so, you grow up, you get older, you get married, you have a wife, a kid, a mortgage, and all that sort of stuff, and other priorities take over. So I had all these Sports Illustrateds in these boxes for years and years and years. And, when I bought my first house, my parents said, here, this is all your junk. Take it. And so I
get it out of here.
Yeah, get it out of here. I stopped collecting them for a long time. And I had them sitting in my basement. And I had these boxes that was all this junk from my room when I was a kid. And I was moving several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was moving and it was cleaning out the basement and going through all this stuff. And I opened these boxes of Sports Illustrated and I was like, oh, these are cool. And so I started looking into it a little bit more. And I realized that people were getting them graded. And let me show you an example of what one looks like, just like sports cards get graded. So people get Sports Illustrateds graded and collect them. This is a good one. So this is what one graded looks like. So this is the very first Sports Illustrated cover from August 1954. That's Eddie Matthews on the cover right there. Right. And as you can see, this has been graded. There's a company, the big company that grades comic books. They're called CGC. They grade Sports Illustrated. And it kind of makes sense because this is much more like a comic book than it is a sports card. So I just kind of jumped into it and started researching it and learning about it. And I had all these Sports Illustrateds and they were in great condition because I hadn't touched them in 30 years and just kind of fell in love with it. And then the pandemic hit. And of course, all of us had all this free time on our hands. And so when that happened, I just really jumped into it with both feet. And
that's, because like you were talking about baseball cards, like that kind of made a rebound during the pandemic. I think, like you're saying, same thing. Like people had a lot of time on their hands and just started digging through their old stuff. It seems like, right?
They did. So and all collectibles, whether it's sports cards or comic books or Sports Illustrated. I mean, people get VHS tapes graded and video games and Funko Pops and all sorts of crazy stuff. But collectibles of all sorts just sort of exploded, and it's for people, and mostly driven by people in our age demographic, Gen X for the most part, because we've got nostalgia over these things from when we were kids. We are, older and more adult and, have more disposable income than we did when we were 13 years old to be spending, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and sometimes a lot more of that on some of these sorts of things. So, and then the pandemic hit and everybody had, all this extra free time. So things just kind of exploded over the pandemic, including the hobby of collecting graded Sports Illustrated. So that's kind of how I got started into it. And kind of where I got to today.
I can't imagine that cover that you were just holding up there. It's graded at a 9.8, and this is a scale of 10, I believe, right?
It is. So, like I said, the company that grades these is the largest comic book grading company in the world. And their scale does go to 10. I can tell you that all of the, tens and tens and tens of thousands of Sports Illustrateds that have ever been graded, there's never been one that's been given a grade above 9.8. There's a handful of comic books that have gotten a 9.9 or a 10, but those are usually ones that come like straight off the printing press and that sort of stuff. And it's really because of the way these were manufactured, and the way they were produced and shipped and distributed and sitting on newsstands and that sort of stuff. There's just no way for you to get a perfect grade on it. So 9.8 is kind of considered a 10 or the best grade possible.
I mean, to have the very first SI with a 9.8, I imagine that's got to be worth something, quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so these and there's a little story behind this, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, or we'll be here till 3:00 in the morning. But so Sports Illustrated, when this issue first came out, Sports Illustrated produced, a bunch of them and all that sort of stuff. But the extras they held on to, and they kept them in a warehouse. And they sat in the warehouse for decades. And then in like the 90s and 2000s, somebody decided at Sports Illustrated, say, hey, and this would be a good idea if maybe we package these and sell them. And so there were ads in Sports Illustrated magazine that say, hey, you could get this original first copy of Sports Illustrated in a fancy leather binder with a certificate of authenticity. And it was like $300 or $400. And you could, have this. And so people bought those. And so there's actually a lot more of these out there than you might think. And so, and a 9.8 is in this issue is a little bit more common than you might think, just because there was this kind of warehouse find of this specific issue. But yeah, so these have sold, and collectibles have kind of come down off of their peak from the peak of the pandemic in 2021, 22. At the peak, this was probably worth about $10,000. Now they sell for about $6,000 or $7,000. So yeah,
Still,
it's
$6,000 or $7,000. That's
it's big business, and it's the real deal. And there's a lot of collectors out there, and just like sports cards, there are a lot of people that view these as investments, and they're going to spend a lot of money on them now, and hopefully that in 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years, they're going to be worth a heck of a lot more.
And now, one thing that I've heard you talking about when you talk about the value, again, like I had a subscription, and when I first saw you doing this, I was like, oh man, I wish I would have kept all those different magazines, but they wouldn't necessarily be worth a lot because having that mailing label affects value, right?
It does. So if anybody's interested in this, the first thing you've got to learn about this is the difference between a subscription issue and a newsstand issue. Obviously, the subscription issue was mailed to subscribers. The newsstand issue was at the grocery store or at the newsstand that you could buy it off of the newsstand. And there's a big difference, and it really comes down to supply and demand. And Sports Illustrated has come out and said that, and this varied over the history of Sports Illustrated, but they produced about 2.5 to 3 million copies of each issue every single week that were subscription issues. But for newsstand issues, they only produced about 50 to 100,000 copies. So what the really high-level collectible copies of Sports Illustrated are all newsstand copies and not subscription copies. Because I get people all the time, like you said, that'll shoot me a DM on social media or message me on YouTube or whatever and say, hey, I got all my subscription issues in the basement. This is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not. You have to have the newsstand issues. Those are the ones that really sell for tens and tens of thousands of dollars.
So give everybody an idea. Let's say they've got, a couple old Sports Illustrateds, or, a box of Sports Illustrateds, or whatever, and they're like going through like, wow, this is in pretty good shape. So what's the process of this whole thing of finding out the value, getting them graded, and all that kind of stuff? What does someone have to do?
So like all collectibles, finding out the value, eBay is still the best resource. And look at past sales, previous sales on eBay of graded issues of Sports Illustrated, to see what the most valuable ones are. Now, generally vintage, similar to sports cards, older ones are generally worth more, although there's plenty of modern issues that go for a lot of money. But then there's a company called CGC. Their website is cgccomics.com, and anybody can go there and sign up for an account and send them your magazines of any sort. Sports Illustrated is the predominant publication that people collect, but people collect other ones too, and send them in to get graded. And it's really that simple. And if you're familiar with sports cards and the way sports cards are graded, it's very similar to the way PSA or BGS or any of those sports card grading companies handle the grading process. The wait time is about 3 months right now from the time you send it in to the time you get it back. And it's really not that difficult of a process if you're interested in doing it on your own.
Now you do, there's like pressing and stuff that you have there, right? Like, do you do some of that? No, what's all that entail?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. So, obviously what people want is a very high grade that makes it more collectible.
Sure.
And there's this thing that comes from comic books that's called pressing, where essentially you use a heat press, a t-shirt heat press, to remove flaws in the magazine to get a better grade. Now, if you come from the sports card world, you're going to be like, hey, wait a minute here. That sort of thing's not allowed. And that is true with PSA and BGS and the sports card grading companies. If you do anything to that card, they're going to send it back to you and label it as altered, and they're not going to grade it. Or they're going to, if they do grade it, they're going to label it as altered on and not give it a grade. But again, from the and graded magazines is like half comic books, half sports cards. But pressing is a well-established method of restoration on the comic book side, and it also applies to magazines as well. And it's all just about a process that you go through that helps you improve the grade.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
We got a question here.
Sure.
From We Are Not Marshall. He says he's got a Mickey Mantle SI when he won the 57 Triple Crown, and he signed it. Any value to that? What do autographs do to value?
So that's a great question. There's a lot going on here. So the 57 Mickey Mantle Sports Illustrated, certainly a collectible issue. Even if it's a subscription issue, if it's in decent shape, there's probably some collectability to it. Not nearly as much as if it was a newsstand issue, but there's still some collectability to it. And then the autograph. Mickey Mantle autographs. Mickey Mantle autograph on a piece of paper is probably, I hate to guess, but because I'm not really up on my autograph pricing right now. But a Mickey Mantle autograph on a piece of paper is probably $400 to $800 or something like that. So the Mantle autograph is certainly collectible on its own. With the magazine, it's certainly more collectible. It's a little tricky, and I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but CGC doesn't recognize third-party authenticators of autographs. So even if that autograph is authenticated by the big autograph authentication companies like PSA and JSA and Beckett, CGC doesn't recognize those. So technically, they'll treat that autograph as just any other writing. They'll treat it as a defect. But yes, so that's a long-winded answer to say that, yes, that's collectible. Absolutely, that's collectible. And it's collectible as it is just because of the Mickey Mantle autograph. Getting it graded would probably make it a little bit more collectible.
Okay. That's pretty cool then. It sounds like a pretty nice piece. At the very least, something that you'd probably want to get framed. Does it, when we're talking about value, do you have to have the entire magazine? Is more about just what's on the exterior, like the cover and the backside? How important is what's inside?
Yeah, so what's inside is so, and this is not me saying this, but this is what the market is telling me as far as the collectibles and what they sell for. It is all about who's on the cover. It is not about what's on the inside. And that's different than comic books. Comic books are a little bit different, and the story of the comic book is important, and who the illustrators and the writers of the story were important. None of that really matters. And I'll show you another example here. I've got a ton of examples I can show you. So this is
Absolutely.
Yogi Berra's first Sports Illustrated cover from 1955. And
Love
you can
it.
see there it's graded at 9.6. This
Mhm.
is what is inside it, and the articles on the inside for the most part, on 99.9% of them are irrelevant. This is all about the fact that this is Yogi Berra's first cover. Just like sports cards, everybody wants that rookie sports card. It's the same thing with graded magazines. Everybody wants that first cover appearance of that Hall of Famer. And so again, this is Yogi Berra's first Sports Illustrated cover from 1955. This one's graded at 9.6. And this one is really collectible. It's Yogi Berra, obviously. It's his first cover. This is a beautiful looking cover.
It is.
It's that
fantastic.
tight headshot. He's one of the greatest catchers of all time, and he's in there in his catcher's mask. You know, this is kind of what. There's a couple of things here that I think make graded magazines and Sports Illustrateds for me are better than sports cards, and really, it's the photography. That's a big piece of it. I mean, this captures Yogi Berra in a way that I've never seen captured on any of his sports cards. It's just an amazing shot. I'll show you another one.
I think I've seen that, online someplace before, but I don't think I've ever seen an actual copy like that.
Yeah. This is a great one. So this is Bobby Orr's first Sports Illustrated cover. This is from 1967. I don't know if people can see this, but Bobby Orr, he's got a broken nose and it's bleeding, and you've got the classic old school goalie face mask like Jason from Friday the 13th in the back.
Uh-huh.
That's the sort of thing. So it's collectible because it's Bobby Orr, the greatest defenseman of all time, and it's his first Sports Illustrated cover. But it's this photography, and Sports Illustrated was always known for their photography, award-winning photography throughout the entire length of that publication, and that's really what drives an incredible amount of the appeal of these magazines and their collectability. Is this just screams old-time hockey. Guy's got a broken nose and he's bleeding. Nobody's wearing helmets. You got the old, Jason from Friday the 13th face mask on the goalie in the background. That's the visual appeal that everybody really loves about these. And you mentioned, kind of touched on it briefly a second ago, they display so well. I mean, these display, if you've got a man cave or in your office or something like that, they display so much better than a sports card. A part of that is the size, but also part of that is just that amazing photography and that visual appeal.
Derek wants to offer you $50 for Bobby Orr.
For the Bobby Orr. Yeah, this one, it's even at 7.5. This one's probably worth more like $3,000 or $4,000. So appreciate the offer, Derek, for $50. I'm gonna pass. But so, I appreciate your interest on that.
Do you go garage sailing at all, like hoping to find any of these gems, or is that kind of like a thing of the does that not happen anymore?
No, I do. So this hobby has really exploded the last 3 to 5 years. And so, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I used to be able to just go on eBay and find great stuff and buy it. Most of, especially the vintage newsstand issues for the most part, have been picked over on eBay. And now that the rest of the world has kind of gotten wind of this, if you do find one, it's going to be pretty darn expensive to buy, even ungraded and raw. So the way that I source these is just through good old-fashioned grunt work. It's garage sales, it's estate sales, it's antique malls, it's just my personal community and network of friends that I've got that may have collections or issues sitting around that they want to sell. So it's never been harder to find ungraded collectible copies than it is right now, and that's why people are paying so much for these. That's why, I've got here, this is Willie Mays' first Sports Illustrated cover from 1955, graded at 8.0. That's why, and this one's probably worth several $1,000s as well. There are only a handful of these out there, and they're impossible to find, very difficult to find. And when you can get one of a big star in their first cover in a high grade, they're going to sell for thousands and even tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And it's because they're really rare. So talk about it. So for example, Mickey Mantle's sports card that the Topps 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card that everybody wants, a copy of it. One of those just sold for $12 million either earlier this year or late last year. But there's only 3 copies of those. Graded at PSA 10, but overall, there's about 4,000 copies of that sports card that have ever been graded. that 52 Topps Mickey Mantle sports card. There's about 4,000 copies that have been graded. The 1956 Mickey Mantle Sports Illustrated in newsstand, there's less than 40 that have ever been graded. So really what people love about this hobby is that rarity. They can sit here and say, look, I own something that only a Mickey Mantle that only a handful of people in the entire world also have. It's a status symbol because of its rarity.
So, like you're talking about rookie baseball cards for something like this, for SI covers, is the first time an athlete shows up on the cover, is that kind of does that do for that cover what, the rookie card is to baseball cards? Does it jack up the value the same way?
It does significantly in about 99% of the cases. Now you have to keep in mind, and I didn't grab I only grabbed good examples. I didn't grab a bad example, but there are a few instances where an athlete's first cover just really isn't all that great. Bo Jackson is a great example. So Bo Jackson's first Sports Illustrated cover was in 1985. It was when he was up for the Heisman, but he was on the cover with about 5 or 6 other guys that were all up for the Heisman. And he's just got this little tiny picture of him. So collectors tend to gravitate toward his second cover, which is a fantastic cover. It's just Bo. He's in his minor league baseball uniform. He's got, this really tight jersey on and his guns are, bursting out. It's just a great cover. But yes, 99% of the time, all the value or the majority of value is in an athlete's very first Sports Illustrated cover. And that's what collectors want, just like they want the rookie cards for sports cards.
Irish Chi-Town asks, are newsstand special issues worth more?
Oh, great question. So what he's talking about are the special commemorative issues, or what are technically called Sports Illustrated Presents. So for example, when, and I got a bunch of these, Chicago Bulls would win, and they'd win the NBA title in 1996. They would produce a special commemorative copy. It was not sent to subscribers. It was just available on the newsstands, and it would celebrate the Bulls, winning their 4th NBA title in 1996. So that's what he's talking about. Oddly enough, I don't know why, those aren't nearly as collectible as the normal weekly Sports Illustrated issues. Not sure why. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what the market is saying as far as pricing and collectability.
It's like the baseball all-star cards. They would always put out all-star, and those are like the least valuable of the cards in the bunch, it seemed like.
That is an outstanding analogy, Sean, and I'm totally going to steal that going forward. So thank you for that. Yeah, that is kind of like the all-star card. So, back to Mickey Mantle, 1957 Topps, you've got the 57 Topps regular Mickey Mantle, but then there'd be the 57 Topps Mickey Mantle all-star card and that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very similar to that. The all-star card, or sometimes they would produce a series of everybody that won the Golden Glove that year, and it would be their Golden Glove card or something like that. Those are not as collectible. Don't know why, but it's very similar to Sports Illustrated Presents and those commemorative issues. It's not saying that they're not collectible at all. There's certain ones that are. They're just not as collectible as the same athlete that would be on the normal weekly Sports Illustrated cover. Great question, though. Really good one.
Do you have a favorite? Like someone particular, like whether it's a favorite cover or a favorite athlete, favorite team, whatever it happens to be.
Well, I'm a Jordan guy. So I grew up, I was 10 years old, living in the suburbs of Chicago when the Bulls drafted Michael Jordan in 1984. So I was destined to be a massive Bulls and Michael Jordan fan. And that's kind of how when I started getting these graded, I thought, so Michael Jordan's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated 50 times. It's about double who's in second place. So way more than anybody else. So when I started in this hobby, that was my initial goal. I was like, I'm going to collect all 50 Michael Jordan covers. I'm going to get them all in newsstand, and I'm going to get them all graded. And I did that. I ended up finishing up that set about a year or two ago. So Jordan's my favorite athlete by a mile, and I've got all 50 of his Sports Illustrated covers graded. And I wish I had grabbed this one and pulled it out so I could show you. I have it's a Michael Jordan cover from 1992 that was right after they beat the Trailblazers in the 92 finals to win their second NBA title back to back. and it's just Jordan on the cover, and he's flashing the peace sign for number 2 and that sort of stuff. That specific issue, my mom had bought for me at the grocery store after that championship, and I had saved it for 30 years until I got it graded a few years ago, and it came back at a perfect 9.8. So I've got some sentimentality toward that one, obviously, because that was one that my mom had bought for me, and I'd saved it forever. I'll show you one that isn't very valuable, but I like a lot, or isn't as valuable as you might think. So this is Time Magazine. This is Ara Parseghian, and this is his first Time Magazine cover. It came out on November 20th, 1964, and it's autographed.
Oh, wow.
So this one, Notre Dame, for as much as we all love Notre Dame, and God, I'm still a huge Notre Dame fan. They're not as collectible in the sports card world as you might think.
Really?
Yeah, just because people focus on the pro athlete and the pro thing more. Not that they're saying that, not saying that Notre Dame stuff isn't collectible. It certainly is. It's just not as collectible as you might think. The grade's not awesome. It's only a 6.5. But obviously, being a huge Notre Dame fan and getting this autographed by Ara Parseghian, and of course, Ara's no longer with us. This one certainly sentimental for me and one of my favorites. I'll show you another. I pulled out a couple Notre Dame ones. This is November 7th, 1966. We're getting some glare on there, and I don't think you can see the gray. This is Terry Hanratty.
That's what you said. I thought it was Hanratty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Hanratty from Notre Dame. This one, and again, Terry Hanratty's, didn't have much of a pro career, if any, so he's not all that collectible in the world of sports collectibles and that sort of stuff. But again, back to the visual appeal of this, I freaking love this cover.
It's a cool looking picture.
It's a great cover. You got all the gold helmets, and obviously you can tell that it's freezing out because they've got the big blue jackets over their shoulder pads and all that stuff. And you got Terry Hanratty, who was a legend at Notre Dame and all that sort of thing. This one is graded. You can't see it, but it's graded at 8.0, and it's the highest graded copy in the world. So
really?
This is at 8.0. Nobody has a higher graded copy than this one
now
in newsstand.
So
again, being a big Notre Dame fan, this is also one of my favorites.
Have you gone out and actually, purchased ones at, I guess higher value, and or are most of yours like your own sort of like personal finds, whether they're what we were just talking about, estate sales, garage, like are the majority of yours, I guess, organic? I don't know, for lack of a better term.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, so the most of mine I have purchased ungraded, or what's called raw, ungraded, and got them graded myself. But yeah, no, I bought a ton of that Bobby Orr that we looked at a minute ago. Yeah, I purchased this one. Is almost impossible to find this issue in newsstand ungraded. And so I purchased this one already graded at 7.5. So yeah, no, I absolutely I buy ungraded issues and get them graded. And I buy ones that are already graded. Yeah, plenty of that. And I sell ones that are ungraded and all that sort of stuff too. I'm way into this than your average collector, so I'm
obviously
I'm constantly buying and selling and doing all sorts of fun stuff like that with these. But yeah, I do both. I buy them ungraded and get them graded myself, and then I buy them already slabbed and graded. And you know what? I think all collectors in this hobby are buying a lot more of them already graded because you just can't find them ungraded anymore. Or it's very, very difficult, especially the really collectible ones.
Where's the bulk of the buying and selling of these taking place then?
Good question. So eBay is where the most is happening, and that's true for any collectible. eBay is just a behemoth, and so if anybody's interested in this, just go onto eBay and search CGC Sports Illustrated, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of graded copies of Sports Illustrated that are for sale. The other good website to look at is Heritage Auction House, and their website is ha.com. And what's great about Heritage is they archive all of their sales indefinitely. So eBay, you can look and see what sold and what the price they sold for going back only 90 days. But on Heritage, you can sit here and go back to 2009 or 2013 and see that this graded copy of Michael Jordan Sports Illustrated sold for this much. So yeah, ha.com is their website. heritageauctions.com is where a lot of a lot of buying and selling takes place, and the really expensive, premium, top tier pieces get auctioned at Heritage. So I'll give you an example. The highest price ever paid for a graded Sports Illustrated at a public auction was earlier this year, and it was Sandy Koufax's. It wasn't even his first cover; it was his second cover, but it was graded at 9.8, and it sold for $33,000.
My goodness.
Yeah. So all the record prices are all being broken over at Heritage.
Man.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast a few months back. I don't know if you've heard this story. Being as into collecting, you may have. The whole Nick Cage Superman stolen out of his house. So have you heard that? And
he had a ton. Comic books worth millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Graded comic books worth millions of dollars that were stolen from his house. Yeah, Nicolas Cage, the actor. I did hear that.
And what you're talking about with the grading and the archiving of, like the records that they keep on all of these, they eventually were able to, it took several years, but they tracked this thing across the country because of the way, it's graded and marked and all this different stuff. They were able to find it several years later. Each of
these, and this is similar to comic books and sports cards, and you're not going to be able to see it here, but there's a barcode right there and a verification number. So all of these, these grading companies do a really good job at making sure that these are all cataloged and graded, and anybody can look this up. So for example, if you could see that barcode and that verification number, anybody could go to the CGC website, input this verification number, and pull up all the data on this specific slab in my hands right here. It would talk about, Wayne Gretzky, this is his first Sports Illustrated cover, the date it came out, the date that this issue was specifically graded. It'll give you all sorts of information about it. So yeah, and that helps with things like theft and that sort of stuff too, just like in the Nick Cage example.
Yeah.
By the way, this issue used to this Wayne Gretzky first Sports Illustrated had the record sale price before that Sandy Koufax earlier this year.
Really?
It was late last year. A copy of this at 9.4 sold on Heritage Auctions for $30,000 late last year. That was the record until Sandy Koufax broke it. And actually, there was a private sale that took place that I actually kind of helped broker and was kind of in the middle of a little bit. Actually, not that one. The Sandy Koufax one I was involved in. There was a private sale that took place just about a month ago of Wilt Chamberlain's first Sports Illustrated cover. I think it's from 1961, graded at 9.4, that sold for $65,000.
Wow.
Now that was a private sale, but yeah. So that's the highest known price ever paid for a graded copy of Sports Illustrated, $65,000.
Derek was asking what that Gretzky goes for.
Yeah, this one. So this one in 9.0, this is probably, and again, prices have come down on stuff. And again, so like sports cards too, prices on sports cards have come way down, except for that ultra elite tier, like the Mickey Mantle that sold for $12 million. Same thing with this. This one is only at a 9.0. This one is probably worth $4,000 or $5,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably $4,000 or $5,000. I think there's only 7 copies in the world that are graded higher than this one.
Wow.
So it's, again, really, really rare, and that's why people will pay a lot for them. This one, this is, Yogi Berra. There are 2 copies in the world graded at 9.6, and there are none graded higher. This one's probably worth. This one's worth a lot.
I would imagine
it's worth.
You don't have to say how much that.
Yeah, it's worth well over $10,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, where did you come upon that one? Do you remember
that one? I bought it ungraded.
Okay.
And I've owned that one. I've owned several copies of that one, and I had one at 9.2. And I'm trying to remember. I either bought it on eBay. I can't remember which one was which. I either bought it on eBay or I connected with a guy, a Sports Illustrated collector in Canada.
Okay.
And I bought his whole collection a year or 2 ago, and they were all vintage newsstand issues, and I bought his entire collection from him. And I think that's where that 9.6 Yogi Berra came from.
So
This one I got graded. This one I did not find raw. I bought this one that was already graded when I bought that one.
How many do you think you have? Do you know how many you have in your collection?
Way too many. Now keep in mind, I'm always buying and selling and trading and getting new ones in. I probably got on hand right now, maybe 400. Is that stupid? Is that a big number? That sounds, when you say it out loud, it sounds stupid. So I think it's stupid. Yeah, no, I've got about 400 of them.
But I mean, you enjoy it, obviously, and there's,
they're not all vintage. I mean, so let's talk about. Oh, you'll like this one, Sean. I got this one out for you. This is fun. So this is not a Sports Illustrated, but this is Time magazine from 1998 when the Yankees won the World Series.
Oh, wow.
Now, what's cool about this one is, so Sports Illustrated did this too. Time didn't do it nearly as much. Sports Illustrated did it a lot in the 2010s. They would produce multiple covers for the same week, and they're called regional variants.
Right.
So Sports Illustrated, well, let's talk about this one time. So this guy here, he's a writer, David Wolf. He was on the main cover of Time magazine that was produced this week. So most of the country, if you were at a newsstand, you would see this cover, David Wolf, and it looked just like that. But for the New York metro area, Time magazine produced a special cover with the Yankees on it. So what that is, now Time didn't make more magazines. They produced the same number of magazines, but they just had two different covers. The inside is exactly the same. The stories and the articles are all the same. They just had different covers. So this one is called a variant. It makes it a lot more rare because most of them have this guy, that David Wolf guy, on the cover. But the ones that were sold in the New York metro area had the Yankees on the cover. And I love this one for a number of different reasons. And it talks about it. It says variant cover on there. And you can go into the CGC website and be able to pull up exactly how many of copies of this one specifically are graded, as well as how many of that Tom Wolfe might be graded. I don't know if anybody's into authors and get those graded. But I love this cover because that 98 Yankees team was amazing. I love it because, it's got a 9.8 grade on it, and because it's a variant and it's really rare. It was interesting. Sports Illustrated had an issue where they talked about what might be, there you go, the greatest season in sports history. And they argued all these sorts of things. And what they settled on was 1998. They settled that 1998 was the greatest season in sports history. It talked about the Bulls winning the finals and how great that team was. Talked about all these other things, but it talked about how the 98 Yankees were probably the best baseball team in history. And Time kind of captured that as well and declared them the best baseball team ever here in this one. This is a fun one. I think you're muted, Sean. There you go.
Yes, thank you. Everything, when I blew up the screen, it muted me as well.
I'll show you one more. So like sports cards, modern sports cards can be collectible too. Modern Sports Illustrateds can also be collectible. This is Luka Doncic's first Sports Illustrated cover. It's also Trae Young of the Atlanta Hawks' first Sports Illustrated cover. Now, there's a lot of these graded because as this hobby has grown, more people are buying these directly off the newsstand and they're getting them graded and that sort of stuff, and they're in great condition. So this is Luka Doncic's first cover at 9.8. I can tell you I think there's probably 100 of these already graded at 9.8. So the pop counts are a lot higher on these moderns, as you would expect, but this is still a very collectible issue and probably worth, I don't know, $600-700.
Wow.
Even though it just came out, November 2021. So it's 18 months old. 18 months old. Yeah.
Well, and has the shift because SI is not a weekly anymore. It is a monthly, and like newspapers and everything. It's going the wrong direction for any print publications. But has that affected any of this? It doesn't. I mean, like in that specific instance, it obviously hasn't. But has that affected the just values of some of these collectibles and things like that?
It just means there's fewer newer copies out there. I mean, we went from having 52 new copies of Sports Illustrated every year down to I think they do about 15 a year now. So we don't have as much new product coming into the hobby. So you're not getting as many first covers as many new stars on first covers and that sort of stuff. Very rarely do they have action shots. This is an action shot that was taken at the stadium of the celebration
Yeah.
on the field after the game. Most of Sports Illustrated covers these days are now studio shots, not as appealing to collectors as those action shots on the field
Right.
and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it has affected it a little bit. Absolutely.
So I don't know if you'll know the answer to this one. Beefeater, are autographs addressed to the owner worth more or less than just an autograph? Do you know anything about that avenue?
Autographs addressed to the owner. So I'm not quite sure what he's talking about there, but I will.
You know, like to Timmy. Darren,
inscriptions.
Kind of
yeah, inscribed. Yeah. So, and this is not just true for Sports Illustrated. This is true for all autographs. Inscription autographs are not nearly as valuable. So if you've got an autograph that was somebody, hey, James, it was great to meet you, in South Bend at that Notre Dame game, signed Tim Brown.
Right.
That's not nearly as collectible because nobody except somebody named James who met him at the Notre Dame Stadium that day is going to care about that. So yes, inscriptions definitely devalue the value of autograph. But he did reference address labels. So let's talk about that because there's a couple of things. So you can find this one on Heritage Auction. So there's a couple of instances where an address label in a subscription issue actually makes that issue much more collectible.
Oh, really?
And it's when the address label and the subscription was by a famous athlete. So if you go on heritage.com, you can look this one up, and I'll tell you a quick story. And Sean, if you need me to, I can talk for hours about this. So if you need me to shut up,
you're fine.
I think this was about 3 years ago. Right after Kobe Bryant's passing, there was a Michael Jordan Sports Illustrated. I think it was from 1992. That was a subscription issue. That was Kobe Bryant's personal subscription issue, and on the label it says Kobe Bryant. And it was his home address when he was a teenager.
No kidding.
Now, the grade was only 4.5, but nobody cared about the grade because Kobe Bryant read this issue. This was his personal issue. It sold for almost $10,000. It sold for almost $10,000. I was bidding on that, and I'm still kicking myself to this day that I didn't spend more to get it because I can guarantee you it's worth a lot more than that today.
I would imagine
there's a semi-famous copy of Slam magazine. You remember Slam magazine? It was all
basketball.
Yeah. So there was a copy of Slam magazine. I can't remember who was on the cover, but it was LeBron James' personal copy, and it was addressed to him at his address in Akron. Did you watch there's a Netflix documentary that just came out in the last month or so about Golden Auctions? They're a big memorabilia auction house.
I haven't seen that.
See that? It was cool. Peyton Manning had a piece in it and showed up to this auction house in New Jersey. The company's called Golden, and he brought an item with him, and it was his first Sports Illustrated cover from 1996, and it was a subscription issue, and it was addressed to him at his his dorm or his college house that he lived at.
On the cover, and it's got
him on the cover, and it's got his name on the address label, and it says
Wow.
Peyton Manning, and it's his address at Knoxville when he was going to school at Tennessee. So there's a couple of rare instances like that where those subscription issues the value on those can go absolutely through the roof because that was personally owned by that athlete, and you've got an absolute one of a kind. There'll never be another one. There'll never be another copy of Peyton Manning's first Sports Illustrated from 1996 addressed to Peyton Manning. He ended up not consigning that issue to Golden. I assume Peyton still owns it, but I'd kill to get my hands on that copy. That'd be
no
amazing.
kidding. So basically, anyone famous, that's the exception to the label, the address label rule.
It is,
and I'm talking about high fame, and
there's a couple of
Jack
other
Nicholson
exceptions.
walked in and he had, an SI with his
if the address label is addressed to a famous athlete and you can kind of quasi match up the address so that it's not some other Kobe Bryant or some other Jack Nicholson out there, that's going to make it incredibly valuable. And there are some subscription issues that are valuable. I mean, if you've got Mickey Mantle's first Sports Illustrated cover from 1956 and it's a subscription issue and you get it graded, it's certainly going to be collectible and valuable. It's not going to be anywhere near as collectible as a newsstand issue would be, but I'd say there's probably, in my opinion, maybe 50 covers out there that if you had them in a subscription issue, it'd be worth getting graded and having it. It'd be valuable.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Jim, I told you we'd be on for about 30 minutes, and we're well past that at this point. So
a little bit long.
I don't want to keep you past dinner or anything.
No, it's all good. Like I said,
that's a lot of great stuff and some interesting questions. I guess I should ask because I've seen some comments floating through there about swimsuit editions.
Oh yeah.
Are there any particular, like, are those, do they tend to hold some value, or because they're not athletes, how different are those?
Yeah, so who on the cover matters, even if it's not an athlete. I'll give you a side example real quick, and I'll talk about swimsuit issues. But there have been 5 either current or future presidents that have been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan twice, Gerald Ford, and John F. Kennedy. If you can get that John F. Kennedy issue is incredibly collectible. I think it's from 1962. So swimsuit issues, yes, they are collectible. There's a subset of people that's all they collect are swimsuit issues.
Okay.
The vintage ones are certainly much more collectible. And then the big supermodels that you would expect tend to be more collectible. Christy Brinkley, she was on the cover a number of times. Especially her first one, which I think was 1979. No, I think it was 78. Very, very collectible in newsstand. Kathy Ireland, her issues from the 80s are very collectible. Elle McPherson, those can be collectible, especially if they're in really good condition. And then for the more modern ones, Kate Upton is kind of a big supermodel. Married to Justin Verlander. That doesn't hurt either. So yes, there are. They're not as collectible as the athletes, but yes, swimsuit issues are collectible, and there's a lot of graded ones out there. I own some graded, and yeah. Oh, you know what? I got one right here. That's funny. Just happens to be laying here. This is not a great grade, but this is Elle McPherson and her 1986 swimsuit issue, graded at 6.0.
6.0. All right.
So yeah, there's a lot, and I've got the first swimsuit issue from 1954. And I've got the second one from 55. So I've got some of the vintage ones, and those tend to be really collectible as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
This has been very eye-opening. A lot of really good stuff, entertaining as well. So
Good.
Like I said, I've been following you on Twitter, and I've seen all this stuff. 400 different magazines. I don't think I was ready for that, but do you have like your man cave? Do you have some of them displayed someplace?
I've got a couple of them displayed that are just kind of, I don't have a man cave in the current place I'm living in. I've got a home office, and so most of them are in my home office, but I've got 2 that are displayed. I have the 1980 USA Hockey Miracle on Ice cover at 9.8. It's the only 9.8 in the world. It's the highest graded copy, and so I've got that one displayed. And then I've got Evel Knievel was on a cover in 1974, and as a kid growing up, I thought Evel Knievel was a freaking superhero.
Yeah.
And so those have a personal connection for me, and so I've got an Evel Knievel. The Evel one's only graded at 6.5. But I've got those displayed in my living room. My wife allowed those to be displayed in the rest of the living quarters. But so those are the ones that are the most prominently displayed.
Evel was as indestructible as a superhero back then. It's like no matter what he did, it seemed like he would never break.
And I love these magazines do a great job of capturing a moment in time. And I wish I had that Evel copy down here because I could show you, because it just screams 70s. He's got this, jumpsuit like Elvis on, ridiculous huge collar. His belt buckle's about as big as your face.
That sounds familiar. I'm sure I've seen it.
It's from 1974, and you just look at that and you're like, oh, that just screams 70s. It just does a great job of capturing that history in that moment in time.
Enigma wants to know if you have a Griffey Jr.
I do. I actually have a number. Oh, you know what? Got one right here. I have a number of Ken Griffey Jr.'s.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is his first Sports Illustrated cover from 1990, May 7th, 1990. This one's graded at 9.0. I've got one at 9.4 as well. For those of you that were in sports cards, for a certain era, the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card was this iconic baseball card that really kind of took over the hobby in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was the card that everybody wanted. Now, unfortunately, Upper Deck produced millions of them. And even at a PSA 10, it's not worth as much as you might think today. But that sort of collectability carries into these Sports Illustrated. So yes, this is certainly a collectible issue. It's graded at 9.0. and his first Sports Illustrated. That's funny that we mentioned swimsuit issues, and I just happened to have one in a huge stack sitting next to me, and somebody mentioned Ken Griffey Jr.
It's right there.
Feel like a magician, able to just pull a couple of those out of the hat like that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, tell everybody where they can follow you. I know you've got a lot of different social channels, wherever you want to direct them.
So the easy thing is my username is the exact same on every single platform. It's CGC Sports Illustrated. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and eBay, and there's a Facebook group. If you're interested in this, I would say do that. Go to Facebook and just search CGC Sports Illustrated. We got a Facebook group. We got about 500 members. Join that Facebook group. But you can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel with a ton of subscribers. It's the same username there too, CGC Sports Illustrated. And I post on it every day on social media. I do a lot of unboxing videos and video podcasts on YouTube and some other educational things about how to get into this hobby, just kind of nuts and bolts stuff for beginners on how to get started and that sort of stuff. So I'm easy to find everywhere. CGC Sports Illustrated.
All right. Very good. Thanks again, Jim, for doing this. I appreciate it.
Sean Stiers, you're the best, man.
You too.
No, this was a ton of fun for me, and the majority of that was getting to talk to you. You were always one of my favorite people when I was living in South Bend, and glad to see you looking good.
I appreciate it. You too. Good to see you.
All right, see you, brother.
All right, we will be back, of course, tomorrow. We will talk to you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.